There is a washing machine sitting in your kitchen right now. You paid somewhere between £400 and £700 for it. You plugged it in, it worked, and you forgot about it because that is what washing machines are supposed to do. They are supposed to work. Then, somewhere between 5 and 7 years in, you start hearing it. A low, grinding rumble during the spin cycle. A noise that builds over the weeks until it sounds like something is trying to escape from inside the drum. You call an engineer out. He takes the back panel off, looks inside for about 45 seconds, and then turns to you with the expression that always means bad news. The bearings have gone. In the old days, that was a £40 repair, maybe £60 with labour. A standard bearing kit, an hour of work, and your machine would run for another decade. But this engineer does not offer you that, because this is a modern machine, and the drum on a modern machine is sealed. The two halves of the outer tub have been glued and ultrasonically welded together at the factory. You cannot open it. You cannot replace just the bearings. You have to replace the entire drum assembly. He slides a quote across the kitchen table, £350 just for the drum before labour, on a machine that cost you £499. That is not a repair. That is a controlled demolition of your household budget. And the company that sold you that machine engineered it this way before you ever walked into Curry's. That is not wear and tear. That is the business model. Before we dive in, comment where you are watching from and click subscribe. Here is what you need to understand first. The sealed drum problem is not unique to the UK. But there are specific reasons why British families take a harder hit from this than almost anyone else. Start with the market itself. The UK is one of the most consolidated domestic appliance markets in the world. 6 corporations own the overwhelming majority of every washing machine brand you will recognise on a Currys or John Lewis shop floor. 6. That is not competition in any meaningful sense. That is a cartel with different logos. Arçelik, the Turkish conglomerate, now owns Hotpoint, Indesit, Beko and Blomberg. Haier, the Chinese giant, owns Hoover and Candy. BSH, the German group behind Bosch, also owns Siemens Domestic Appliances and Neff. Electrolux of Sweden owns AEG and Zanussi. You walk down an appliance aisle believing you are choosing between different companies. You are not. You are looking at the same handful of corporations operating under different nameplates. When consolidation is that extreme, there is no commercial pressure to compete on repairability. The brands are not fighting each other for your long-term loyalty. They are managing your replacement cycle, and the sealed drum is the mechanism. Then there is the consumer protection problem. The UK Consumer Rights Act sounds powerful on paper. 6 years of statutory rights on faulty goods. In practice, after the first 6 months, the burden of proof shifts entirely to you. You have to prove the fault was inherent at the time of manufacture. You are not a materials engineer. You do not have access to the factory tolerances. The manufacturer has an army of lawyers. You have a quote on your kitchen table and a machine that no longer works. Trading Standards does not have the resources to pursue individual cases. Which magazine writes about it? Nothing changes. And then there is the parts pricing. In the UK, when a sealed drum fails on a branded machine, the manufacturer controls the price of the replacement drum entirely. There is no competitive parts market for a sealed drum assembly, because independent repairers cannot source an alternative. The manufacturer has monopolised the repair. They set the price. They know the price makes repair uneconomic, and they built the machine knowing that. Before we get into the brands and the numbers, I want to be honest about how this list was put together and why you should trust it. This is not based on marketing literature or manufacturer-sponsored reliability surveys. We cross-referenced long-term failure data, repair industry intelligence from independent UK engineers who work on these machines after the warranty expires, publicly available parts pricing from manufacturer websites and authorised distributors, and the ownership structures of every major brand sold in this country. We also looked at who is not doing this. Understanding the exceptions tells you everything about whether the sealed drum is an engineering necessity or a commercial choice. Manufacturers will tell you the sealed drum is stronger, more energy efficient, and better engineered than the old split drum. Some of those claims have marginal truth to them. What they will not tell you is that the bearings inside that sealed drum fail at roughly the same rate as they always have. Water still finds its way past the door seal and into the bearing housing. Bearings still corrode. That has not changed. What changed is what happens when they do. One more thing before we get into the list. Several major appliance brands will not enjoy what follows. That is how you know this is accurate. To understand the scale of what has happened, you need to know what you you lost. In the 1970s and 1980s, a British washing machine was a repairable object. Not because manufacturers were more ethical, because the economics demanded it. Machines cost a significant proportion of a household's monthly income. Consumers kept them for 15 to 20 years. Engineers made a living fixing them. The entire ecosystem was built around longevity. The drum on every washing machine made during that era was split. Two halves bolted together with 10 to 12 screws, a rubber seal between them. When the bearings failed, an engineer would arrive, unbolt the front half of the drum, pull the bearings out, press new ones in with a bearing puller, seal it back up and leave. The bearings themselves cost under £20 retail. A back bearing, a front sealed bearing and a drum seal. Less than £15 in parts at today's prices. The same repair that now destroys the economics of owning a washing machine used to be a standard service call. Then two things happened simultaneously, and they ruined everything. Private equity and global consolidation restructured the entire industry. The brands you trusted were bought, merged, rebranded, and handed to cost-cutting executives whose job was not to build better machines, but to increase the margin on every unit sold. At the same time, the focus of consumer regulation shifted to energy consumption and water efficiency. Energy ratings became the story. Repairability stopped being measured. Nobody was watching the engineering decisions that made these machines disposable. The sealed drum appeared gradually from around the mid-2000s. Manufacturers presented it as an innovation. The two halves of the outer drum were ultrasonically welded or glued together during assembly on the production line instead of screwed. The process was cheaper to automate, and it had one other property that the manufacturers never mentioned in any press release. It made bearing replacement economically impossible. Here is the technical reality that engineers will tell you, and that the consumer press mostly ignores. The two bearings in a modern washing machine drum are standard industrial components. The rear bearing on a typical machine retails for around £4 to £5. The front sealed bearing costs around £5. The drum seal costs under £2. Total parts cost to rebuild the bearing assembly on most machines is under £15. The sealed drum assembly that replaces all of that on a mid-range Bosch machine is priced at over £300 on the manufacturer's own website. On some models, the drum alone costs more than 60% of the original purchase price of the machine. That is not engineering. That is asset extraction. Number 1. Hotpoint and Inzit. Let me say something fair about Hotpoint before I explain why it leads this list. There was a time when Hotpoint was genuinely respected. Built in Britain, affordable, reliable, for decades it was the default choice for working British families who needed a machine that would simply work. That reputation is what the brand still trades on in its marketing. The problem is that Hotpoint is no longer that company. It is now owned by Arçelik, the Turkish conglomerate that also owns Indesit. And here is the detail that matters. Hotpoint and Indesit are the same machine with two different badges. Same drum, same electronics, same factory in many cases. When you walk away from a Hotpoint and pick up an Indesit thinking you have comparison shopped, you have not. You have just moved one shelf to the left. Both brands use sealed drums across the majority of their range. Sealed drums with bearings that fail at predictable intervals. The replacement drum on a mid-range Hotpoint machine typically runs between £200 and £350, supplied through the manufacturer's own parts network. An independent repairer cannot source an alternative. Combined with a call-out charge and labour, the total repair bill routinely exceeds the economic threshold for repair on any machine over 4 years old. The machine gets scrapped, another one gets sold, the cycle repeats. The Hotpoint fire recall situation, where up to 1.7 million tumble dryers were found to carry a fire risk and the company resisted a full recall for years, is the wider context here. This is not a company that has historically prioritized the consumer's interest when it conflicts with commercial interest. Number 2. Bosch. Let me be honest about Bosch. It makes an excellent washing machine. The wash performance, the build quality of the cabinet and door assembly, the reliability of the motor, all of it is genuinely good. For most of its life, a Bosch washing machine is a strong performer. This is what makes what follows particularly damaging. Independent engineers who walked through the Bosch range at major UK retailers recently and recorded the parts pricing from Bosch's own website found numbers that are, to use a polite word, extraordinary. A Bosch Series 4 machine retails at £499. The sealed drum for that machine costs £360. A Bosch Series 6 anti-stain model retails at £549. The drum alone costs £493. That is nearly the full purchase price of the machine just for the drum. The PCB on most of these machines runs to £170 to £220. The motor is around £133. Add a call-out charge and 2 hours of labour at current UK rates, and you are looking at a repair bill that exceeds the value of the machine at almost every failure point. That is not accidental engineering. Bosch is owned by BSH, one of the most sophisticated engineering groups in the world. They know exactly what a drum costs to manufacture. They know exactly what a bearing costs to replace. The sealed drum pricing is a deliberate commercial decision. Number 3. AEG and Zanussi. Both are owned by Electrolux. Both are marketed at different price points, with AEG as a premium brand and Zanussi as a value proposition. They share underlying engineering platforms and both use sealed drums across most of their current range. What is particularly instructive about AEG is the positioning. AEG is presented in UK retail as a premium, quality-engineered appliance. The price point reflects that. A mid-range AEG washing machine will cost you £600 to £900. The implied contract with the consumer is that you are paying more for something better. The sealed drum design means you are paying more for something that is no more repairable than a machine costing half the price. The premium is captured on sale, and the repairability problem is shared equally. Number 4. Hoover and Candy. Both have been owned by Haier since 2019. Both are positioned at the value end of the UK market. And when a value machine with a sealed drum fails in the 4th or 5th year, the economics are the most brutal of all. A £300 machine with a £200 drum replacement bill is beyond economical repair before the engineer has even opened his toolkit. The consumer is exposed. The machine was designed to be disposed of. Number 5. Beko. Beko is, on raw reliability data, one of the better performers in the budget category. Independent repair data shows it fails less frequently than several of its competitors, but when it does fail, the sealed drum design means the repair economics follow the same pattern. The bearings in a Beko machine cost the same £15 to rebuild as any other manufacturer. The sealed drum assembly does not, and the consolidation of Beko under the Arcolic Group, the same ownership as Hotpoint and Inzit, means that over time, platform sharing and cost harmonization will likely push Beko's failure rate closer to those of its stablemates. Before we get to the brands worth buying, I want to ask you something directly. Drop a comment right now. Tell me what machine you're running, what failed, and how old it was when it did. My prediction is that a significant number of you are going to say the bearings went between 5 and 8 years. I am also going to predict that a meaningful number of you will say it happened just after the warranty expired. That is not coincidence. Engineers can calculate the failure point of a bearing based on rotational cycles. They know when it will fail. They designed the drum so you cannot fix it when it does. That is not bad engineering. That is precise engineering aimed at a precise outcome. Best number 1, Miele. The Miele washing machine does not make anyone's heart race in a showroom. It does not have the flashiest display or the most aggressive marketing. It costs significantly more than almost anything else on the floor. A mid-range Miele W1 will cost you between £900 and £1,400. What it has, that almost nothing else in the UK market has, is a splittable drum and a 20-year designed lifespan. Miele tests its machines to 20 years of use before they leave the factory. The bearings are accessible, the parts are available, the engineers can fix it. The company has resisted the sealed drum design precisely because their commercial model is built on longevity, not replacement cycles. Miele makes money because consumers trust them and come back. That is a fundamentally different business model to every brand on the worst list. The catch is the price. Miele is a serious household budget commitment. We will address the maths of that in a moment, because it is not as unfavourable as it appears. Best number 2, eBac. eBac is a name that most British consumers have never heard. That is a shame because it is one of the few washing machines that is still manufactured in the United Kingdom, built in Newton Aycliffe, County Durham, and independently owned, with no corporate parent stripping out engineering decisions to hit a margin target. eBac machines are not the most feature-rich on the market. They do not have Wi-Fi connectivity or stain detection algorithms. What they have is a repairable drum design, direct United Kingdom customer service, and the kind of parts availability that comes from a manufacturer that actually intends for you to keep the machine. For a British family that wants to buy something that will run for 12 to 15 years and can be fixed when it fails, eBac deserves serious consideration. Best number 3, Speed Queen. Speed Queen is an American commercial laundry brand that also makes domestic machines for the European market. Their domestic range looks heavy, overbuilt, and slightly industrial. It is all of those things deliberately. Speed Queen machines are designed to last 25 years under commercial laundry conditions. They have used the same core mechanical design for decades. The drum is repairable, parts are available and reasonably priced. Independent engineers in the UK who work on Speed Queen machines describe them as machines from a different era, built to a specification that the mainstream European market largely abandoned a decade ago. They are expensive, and they are not widely stocked in mainstream UK retail. But for a consumer who understands the long-term economics, they represent a genuinely different proposition. Here is what every independent appliance engineer in the country already knows, and nobody tells you before you spend £600 at Currys. Rule 1. Before you buy any washing machine, ask whether the drum is sealed or splittable. Ask the salesperson directly. If they do not know, ask them to find out. If the drum is sealed, treat the machine as a disposable appliance and price it accordingly. Do not pay a premium price for a disposable product. Rule 2. Check the parts pricing before you buy, not after it breaks. Manufacturer websites list drum assembly prices. Search the model number and the word drum. If the drum costs more than 50% of the machine's purchase price, you are buying a machine designed to be written off at first major failure. Rule 3. Check whether the manufacturer is independently owned or owned by one of the 6 global corporations. That ownership structure is not a guarantee of quality or failure. It tells you who the machine was designed for. A manufacturer owned by private equity and accountable to quarterly earnings targets has different engineering priorities than one that is independently owned and accountable to long-term brand reputation. This is where the industry's own pricing turns against it. Option 1. You buy a mid-range sealed drum machine from a major brand. Let's say £500. Conservative life expectancy before the first major failure is 5 to 7 years. Then the bearing assembly fails. The drum replacement quote comes in at £300 plus the call-out charge plus labour. The total repair bill is £450 on a machine worth £500. That is beyond economical repair. You buy another machine, another £500. 7 years later, the same thing happens again. Over a 20-year period, you have bought 3 machines, paid 2 call-out charges, and spent somewhere around £1,600 to £1,800. Option 2. You buy a Miele W1, call it £1,100. Its designed lifespan is 20 years. If the bearings fail in year 12, the drum is splittable, and the repair costs £80 to £150, including parts and labour. Over the same 20 years, the £1,100 purchase plus 1 bearing repair brings the total outlay to somewhere around £1,250. The machine that costs more than twice as much costs less over 20 years. The premium machine is the cheaper machine. The budget machine is the most expensive thing in the room. Nobody puts that number on the tag at Currys. Let us call this what it is. The sealed drum is not an engineering advance. It is a manufacturing shortcut that was adopted across most of the mainstream market within a remarkably short window of time, across brands that we now know are owned by the same small number of corporations. Independent repairers noticed it. The consumer press barely covered it. The regulatory bodies focused on energy ratings and largely ignored it. The bearings in your washing machine cost £15 to replace. The sealed drum that contains those bearings cost £350 to replace, on a machine that cost £500, and the repair bill is structured to ensure you do not bother. The manufacturers knew when those bearings would fail when they welded that drum shut. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is materials engineering. They chose to seal the drum anyway. That is not wear and tear, that is not bad luck. That is the business model. If this video saved your household from a £400 repair bill you should never have faced, subscribe now and share it with anyone about to buy a washing machine. That is all.